Good afternoon, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. Our best of the year start here. As mentioned in the previous one, there's a very few criteria I put in for this one. It's supposed to have started this year. Doesn't necessarily have to finish this year. Could be an ongoing or a miniseries, but not a collection or original graphic novel. And my reason for choosing them are a lot down to my personal taste. I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to try my best to explain why I like them, and hopefully you'll get something from this. First off, starting with one from Dark Horse Comics called Kill Whitey Donovan. And one thing you will notice as I go through these, there's only once, I think, does a publisher end up with two ones on here. And that's not done on purpose. It's just literally I'm reading a whole bunch of stuff at the moment. I'm finding like really enjoyable things everywhere, which is great. Shows that the comic book industry is in a really good state right now. And it also means people should be willing to try smaller press stuff. If you're something where the concept grabs you, or the artwork looks cool, or it's a creator that you've seen do something with Marvel and DC, but doing something a bit smaller, give them a try. You never know, you might find some hidden gem. This one wasn't such a hidden gem for me. I'd seen some promo for this one long before it came out, and already thought, yeah, I'm probably going to pick that up. Because, as you can probably tell from the thumbnail of this thing, me wearing a cowboy hat, bit of a fan of the cowboy films, and TV shows, and comic books. Books I can give or take. Some of the prose written about them is not very interesting. But because it was that kind of era, I was like, yeah, cool, I'm going to check that out. A couple of issues in, I'm like, yeah, this is actually something a little bit better than I was expecting, a little bit more than I was expecting, in fact. It's a Western revenge story, which is not particularly unusual. In fact, it's a genre which works particularly well. A lot of it riffs off the whole samurai revenge story and then riffs backwards onto it again. Look at Akira Kurosawa's work with the Magnificent Seven and things like that. They go round and round and round of Westerns being turned into samurai movies, being turned into Westerns, being turned into samurai movies. All this kind of thing is amazing. This particular Western, though, deals with some aspects of the culture which aren't not necessarily front and center a lot of the time, which is the dying days of the Confederacy and even the end of it. There's still rampant racism, which kind of gets not really glossed over in Western films. It's certainly there, but it's not really like the focus of the story. It's also how women are treated, particularly in this instance, a woman of color, and it's a woman of color and a white woman who basically have both been mistreated by a certain individual called Whitey Donovan, and they go and hunt him down. But they're doing it in a time and a place where two independent women, one of them being a person of color, would not be seen to be okay to go and do their own thing like this. The fact that they are just out on their own is suspicious enough, and it makes the trek an awful lot harder. Also, the fact that they come from very different backgrounds means even though they've been wronged by the same person, they have very little in common, and the friction between the two of them is actually part of the story, and it actually really helps round it out because they are great characters. Pretty much the only character you don't know much about is Whitey. You don't find out much about him until the end, but you see a lot of soldiers and slaves and freemen and stuff like that, all of which have their own little place in the world, and they have the time to explore it very effectively. So it's only 5 issues long. They do a lot with it. It looks great too. It's not over the top. It's kind of art style which I really like for westerns and cowboy stories, which is a little bit more simplistic. It's occasionally open to having amazing wide vista shots or close-up combat kind of thing, which is frenetic and dark and dirty. You're basically dealing with weapons which, yes, had rifle barrels, even for short weapons, but weren't necessarily the most reliable in terms of jamming. You're at a point where a double-action revolver technically could go a lot quicker, but just likely to go wrong as is to fire. For history buffs out there, a lot of people who had double action revolvers would just take out the mechanism and turn it into a single action revolver after a while, because at least they could rely on it that way. So a lot of the fights come across like that, where it's just they're doing their best. Injuries are not necessarily life-threatening straight away, but the after effects of them come across as being that way, because we're dealing at a time period where there's not much in the way of healthcare or even advanced medicine at all. And all of these things make it very much of its time in a way I really, really appreciate. Really admired, in fact, because a lot of this kind of stuff could just be glossed over to make it a little bit more of an exciting story. Not to say it isn't exciting. I said the combat is fantastic. Just because it's dark and dingy doesn't mean it's not great. The pages flow really quite nicely when you get into a fight scene. And it's filled with the emotion of the fight as well. You don't just get the motion lines of a gun being drawn. You get the snarl in the face as somebody lashes out with a small axe, and almost you can feel the judder of it into your arm as it hits a target. It's designed overall to make this idea of revenge, no matter how justified it is, a dark way to go. And don't get me wrong, this is not new ground. The entirety of Last of Us Part 2 dealt with that thing very, very effectively. But I think it's a story worth going over and worth getting into, giving it from different angles. And yes, there's like the kind of predictable, like why these people, women particularly, might want to go after somebody called Whitey Donovan. But they don't just rely on the simplest of tropes. They add to it and they use all of it very, very effectively. The collection of it should be out soon. I actually just checked on the shelf. We don't have it. That's why I was wearing a hat instead of holding a copy of the book. But it is, when it comes out, highly, highly recommended. It's not the best cowboy story that's come out this year, so yeah, keep checking back for those. And like I mentioned in the previous Best of the Year one, if you've got any recommendations of your own that you want people to check out, comment. We have a comment section. It'd be really nice not just have spam in there. Genuinely cool to engage with some people and find out what other people have been reading and enjoying this year. Don't have to be small in your press stuff. Don't have to be cowboy stuff. Whatever you've read that you fancied, that you think somebody else might get a kick out of reading, let me know. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm back tomorrow. I'm not entirely sure I'm going to do a review tomorrow because I think the one I was going to review has totally sold out now. But I'm going to do another one of these. So come back then. Bye.